Hey guys, welcome to Hockey Aussies. And today we're here to talk about all 32 teams and their franchise status.
Alrighty, so just to go through the columns that we have: contenders, teams that are best vying for the cup this year. Last hurrah, teams that can be either contenders or on the verge, but they probably got 1 to 2 years left in their core. On the verge, teams that should or just be outside the playoffs, and then maybe contenders in 1+ years. Retoolers, they are the teams that probably need to make one or more changes, either coaching or player base, to become on the verge. And then the rebuilders, they are either teams rebuilding or need to rebuild. And we'll go on to the first team.
Yeah, the
Alrighty.
first team we're going to discuss today is the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, Vancouver Canucks. I think we both have them under rebuilders, or they're going through a short-term retool. The GM's come out and said that only Elias Pettersson's really the one off limits. Everyone else can be a go. So it's kind of looking like a quick rebuild or a quick retool. They've needed a rebuild for a long time, so I think that's why we have them under rebuilders.
Yeah, they could just do a retool, but I think with what management's come out with, it's going to be a rebuild, but they're going to look to do it quickly. Because yeah, if you're a Vancouver fan, you're looking at it and going, most of our players are mid-20s. How are we going into a rebuild? But there's clearly something wrong there, and they need a bit of a shake up. So yeah, I'm expecting them to have a quick rebuild, but they've got the assets to do it quickly as well.
Yeah,
So
they need it. That core hasn't
yeah,
done anything in the 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it's been together. So yeah, they definitely need it. Alrighty,
exactly.
on to
All
the next
right,
team.
moving on. We've got the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, Washington Capitals. Probably one of the oldest teams in the league. It's definitely one of the biggest reasons why they're under the last hurrah. Finally got a lot of their squad back because they're old and injured. So they're looking really good, really strong right now. Looking like they're a cup contender. But they probably got 1 to 2 more years in them before they have to go into that rebuild status.
Yeah. I definitely think they can contend, but it's definitely their last hurrah.
Mm.
They're trying to get Alex Ovechkin to obviously the goals record, but at the same time trying to be as relevant as possible. I think they're a very slim chance to contend, but I still think they've got that ability in them.
Yeah, they're probably one of my bottom contenders. But definitely last hurrah, better than on the verge for me.
Yeah.
Alrighty, next team.
Right. On to the Florida Panthers. This one could
Mm.
be interesting.
This is an interesting one. Uh, I Yeah, no, they need to do a lot, don't they? Ever since losing, what was it, Burnett? It's kind of fallen off, and it kind of shows how good of a coach he was. So, where do you put him? You can show him where we have it.
Yeah, I think they're a retooling side. I
Yeah,
think they can contend and they've got the team there to do it, but there's clearly something wrong there at the moment. And it's looking like it could be a coaching system. So yeah, I think that there's clearly something they've got to do there. They've got the team, and I think everyone expected them to be a contender this year, but it's just not happening for them. So something's got to change. They've got to mix it up somewhere. Whether that is on the coaching front, I don't know. But maybe you call Burnett up and
yeah, no,
see if he wants to come back. But I think he's pretty happy at the Devils at the moment. But yeah,
yeah, no, it definitely looks like a retool. They need a change, and I think it's coaching base, and then you got to go from there.
yeah, for
Alrighty,
sure. All
next
right,
team.
next team we've got is the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, this is one of the hardest teams to talk about, really. They're kind of in an interesting state of where they are as a team. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, you could either throw them in rebuilding, honestly, or you can put them in retooling. They're a team that could go either way. I think right now we've got them in retooling. I think if they made a couple,
I
yeah,
yeah, I think you could have them in last hurrah almost. Like I feel
yeah,
like they fall in several categories, and yeah, it's weird because their team's not too old to start a full rebuild, but I don't quite think they're there for contenders, and
mm,
I don't know how you sort of quickly get them into that contenders state. So
Yeah.
yeah,
They've
I
just got
think
some
we
expensive contracts you need to move, and that's the hard part, isn't it?
exactly. So I think we've got them in retooling. Um, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting for them because they could quickly fall into that
Mm.
rebuilders phase. It just depends on, I guess, what management does. That's what it comes down to. Can they flip some assets to make them relevant? Because they're not old enough for a rebuild,
No.
but they're not young enough to sort of, if it doesn't happen in the next 2 or 3 years, it's not going to happen at all. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. Those guys.
Alrighty.
All right,
On to the.
on to the Anaheim Duck.
I think it's pretty straightforward where this team is. Definitely
Oh,
have them.
they're in contenders,
They can tell. Oh, okay.
surely.
I thought they already won the cup. It's all right. Yeah, they're they're rebuilding. Pretty straightforward rebuild really. Just getting the assets. They've got some, fascinating people to watch and Zegras and whatnot. So I don't think they're too far off if they get some good picks in this year's draft and then see what assets they can flip for. But yeah, there's not much to say. They've been in a rebuild for a little bit too.
Think we're in no man's land for a little bit, to be honest. Like they tried to stay relevant. Um, they tried to stay in the hunt, but now they've just realised that that's not going to happen. So yeah, they're definitely in a full blown rebuild. They're gonna get a most likely a top 5 pick this year, which is going to help that rebuild. They've got some young up and coming talent in the likes of obviously Trevor Zegras. You've got McTavish. You've got Drysdale and a few others in that mid range as well. So I think they can turn around pretty quickly, but it's going to be probably 5 year rebuild for the Ducks. Um, but they definitely got some pieces.
Yeah, and they got Boston's and Avs second round pick this year and Wild's third round, so they're going to get some hefty amount of draft picks this year. So that's good for them. Already.
Exactly. All right, moving on. We've got the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, it's surprising to have them where they are, just because of how they've been over the last few years and all the players they've lost over the last few years. But I think it's pretty straightforward that they're under Contenders, and which is
Yeah,
scary. It's
I don't think there's any
crazy,
argument.
crazy dynasty that they've set up, and they just keep going on and on and on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they. I, I don't think anyone would have held it against them if they had an off year this year. And the way they started, you could have been like, oh, yeah, okay, here it is. It's finally hit them. But have they bounced back? Like, they've bounced back like crazy. It's insane. Um, the fact that they look as dangerous as they do, and they could be potentially heading to another Stanley Cup if they keep this up is just insane. If they do 4 Stanley Cup appearances in 4 years, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
But
yeah,
it's to asset management as well. When you have the players they have on the contracts that they have, that's why they can do it. And that's
true.
why
Yeah,
I bag McDavid and whatnot so much is because basically over 10 mil, you're getting overpaid no matter what you do on the ice. And there's too many players like that in the league. And you look at Tampa, that not one of their players over 10 mil. 9.5's the highest. So that's why they're
and
getting
they're
it done.
producing. You know, you look at Kucherov. He's produced uh 100+ point seasons.
Mm,
Stamkos has been up there in the goal um leaders. Like they've got a team. Like they've got obviously Sergachev's just signed on long term, good defender. You've got Victor Hedman, one of the
yeah.
best defenders. He's constantly in the Norris Trophy considerations, and Vasilevsky. I mean,
Mm.
he's just a
Yeah,
Vezina
the biggest thing
Trophy
is
winner.
Hedman's under
But
8 mil. Like that's my
yeah,
point. You're getting players who are the best in the league who are you could argue underpaid, but when you win cups, are you underpaid? So
exactly right.
there we go.
Yeah,
On
they've just done it so well. All
yeah,
right, on to Colorado Avalanche.
yeah.
Minute.
Well, they won the cup last year, and I'd still say they're contending for the cup this year. They've had some big injuries through their team. It's just getting all those players back, and then I think they go on a run. And I don't see him in a last hurrah. They got some very young core, and I don't see him on the
Yeah,
verge just because of how good that team is. So the only place they really fit for me is contenders.
yeah, I don't think they're gonna fall out of the contenders race for a few years. I think they're gonna be pretty relevant, like Tampa Bay, quite a while. And it's scary to think that there's two of those teams out there. Obviously, Tampa Bay hold a little bit more um, reins on that at the moment with what they've done. But Colorado Avalanche could potentially, you could see Tampa in four straight Stanley Cups, and then straight after that, Colorado in four straight Stanley Cups. The way that these two teams are built, um, yeah, I think they're perfectly built for an absolute dynasty. Win maybe two to three cups as well,
Yeah,
on top of the one that they've already done.
I agree. All right, on
All
to the
right.
next team.
Next, we've got the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, this is an interesting
This could
team.
be
They're
controversial.
they're um they're kind of contending for the cup here, but the way they've just done their asset management or how they flipped assets, they're kind of in the last hurrah just because of how they have handled those assets, and they are definitely contending this year. They've been really good, but they got salary caps really high, and you gotta manage those assets. So
Yeah, I agree on that one. I think um, they've got a reasonably balanced team, but they've got a few players that are aging, especially on that blue line. Um, and then they've obviously got a few of their forwards getting older as well. So I, I do think they're going to be around the mark for the next 2, maybe 3 years. But I think as each year goes by, it looks less likely that they'll win that Stanley Cup.
yeah,
So yeah, I don't know if they can get it done either. I think being in the West is going to help them. Bit of an easier, don't we say easier, but there are a few teams that could get in their way, definitely. Um, but it is a little bit easier than the East moving through that playoff run. Um, so that could help them. But yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure.
yep. Alrighty.
All right, on to the next team. We've got the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, this is an interesting team. They're definitely on the up. They've definitely got a great core, an exciting team. You watch them and you fear for the other team with the likes of Zuccarello and Kaprizov and Boldy and etc. But you probably have them not at contending stage at the moment, just on the fact they didn't play great at the start of the season, and they they're not quite there. I think they need one more year, so that's why I got them on the verge.
Yeah, I think on the Verge is the perfect place for them. I think they're probably one of the closest teams in this column to being a contender. I think there's probably one or two others that are almost there with them, but they were definitely on the cusp. It was a very difficult sort of decision there. I think they've got some good players coming through, good young players as well. Um, on their roster that are just absolutely tearing up. Um, but yeah, I expect that they'll be difficult come playoffs, and they
Yep.
could give it a real shake. But it could just be that thing that they just think they need another year um, for a few of their players, especially Matt Boldy. Give him another year, and does that help him hit that next step that they need? So, but
Yep.
it's definitely looking good for them. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So next team we're going to talk about Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, they've
I
kind of
don't
been
think this is
nah, they've been
yeah a
contending for
surprise.
the last 10 plus years. So they're kind of at the end of that run, aren't they? They're the similar state to Washington. So it's essentially a last hurrah for them. It doesn't mean this is their final year, but they're hitting that 1, 2, 3 year, and then they're gonna do that rebuild. I think.
Yeah, I think they made it known. There was I think a conversation they had with Crosby where he wanted to know, do we want to go for it or start a rebuild? What do we want to do? And ultimately, they went signed Malkin and Letang and made that decision and give one last shake with the team that's already brought them, like the core that's already brought them 3 cups. So yeah, I mean they're as well placed as any team in this last hurrah category to really put that real last dance together and actually give it a shake with the likes of Tampa and Avs and all the rest of that to make it a 4th cup.
Yeah.
And with Sidney Crosby, anything's possible. So
Well, they were my favorite at the start of
yeah,
the season. They're still my favorite to win the cup, and I I can see it happening. Honestly, the whole Latang stroke, and then they go and win a cup, that type of story. So
well, it'd be incredible. And yeah, it just cements Crosby's sort of dynasty. Um, so yeah, all right. On to the Columbus Blue Jackets.
yeah, now this is an interesting one with what they've done and then where they were at. It's you could definitely have them in rebuilding and retooling. It depends how you
Mhm.
flip the coin and what type of GM you want to be. I think we both have them at retooling at the moment. It's just because they've gone out, got Goudreau, they've got Line, and you kind of they just need centers. They need a first and second line center, and that on it just takes a retool really. You trade some assets, bring those people in. And I think they're an on the verge team.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they hadn't gone out and got Goudreau and they looked to line off, you might suggest that they're going into a rebuild. But with that Goudreau contract, there's no way they're going into a rebuild anytime soon. They've got a few pieces there to sort of build something, and they've got a few young players coming through as well to help with that. It might take a couple of years, but yeah, I think you're right on the centers. If they can go out and get themselves a couple of decent top line or top 6 centers, that'll help them a lot.
Mm.
Uh, their defense, obviously, it doesn't help when um, I think he might has he come off? No,
I don't know.
Warinsky. Sorry, yeah, that's right. Warinsky's on your long-term injured
Yeah.
reserve basically all year. I don't know about Boquist. I mean, he's young and he's got a bit of talent there. He's also on their long-term injured reserve. I don't know if he's coming back this year, but
Mm.
it definitely doesn't help their case this season. But that also does allow them to put another young asset into this team, which is
Yeah.
going to help.
Well, I understand it's a defensive liability player and it's a inter-division trade, but maybe you look at a Kevin Hayes who's fallen out of love with the coaching there and getting healthy scratched. You know the way he scores. You can definitely throw him between Goudreau and let him run that, and I don't think it would cost much to get him into that team. And that's the kind of player they could go for. Poach that type of player. That's what they need to do.
Yeah, they definitely need a center. I don't know if you really want that type of player, but
I know you don't want
definitely
that type of player, but he's a big scorer. I know he's a defensive liability, but I'm not too sure what else is on the market for second or first line centers.
that's fair.
Alrighty.
All right, on to the next team, Seattle Kraken.
Yeah, yeah, pretty new team. Definitely having a better year than last year. They've they've picked up some great young talent, and well, they're pushing forward, aren't they? So they're definitely on the verge, I believe. And
Yeah, you
yeah,
could have a rebuild. You could have them in rebuilders, but I feel they've taken that next step.
yeah. I think last year had them in rebuilders, and then they've just flipped it. So yeah, no, they surprised me. I like the coaching game style that they're trying to play, and that's what you can ask for. Is just everyone's competing. They got probably the best youngster in the league who's going to win the that trophy. So and Berniers, but I don't think they're contenders. That's the problem.
No, I think they're probably on the lower end of on the verge, but I think with some of the youth they've got coming through, and some of those players that are probably early to mid 20s that they've got, is going to help them build. over the next couple of years. I don't think that they're in that. I think they've just popped, and they've done it really quickly, albeit, but they've popped out of that rebuilders phase really well. And if Shane Wright as well can um, just find that groove and come into the team next year, whether or not he comes back, I don't know if he's played his 9 games yet or not, and if they're going to send him down. They've sent him to the World Juniors, so I'd imagine that he's only going to play the 9 games this year, and then he'll head on down. But if he can go out, develop, come back next year, and really be that 1-2 punch with Berniers, then yeah, they could be dangerous for years to come.
Yeah, he's only played 8 games this season, so
Yeah, so he's got one left, which I think will save for the end of the year.
Alrighty, on to
All
the
right.
next team.
And next team, we've got the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, I don't think this is a controversial pick at all. I'll just come out and say I think they're contenders. Last power rankings, I think I had them at number 2, and they're a frighteningly good team in regards to how they've been defending, but also like they're putting up the shots and they're not getting all the goals that other teams are getting, but they look like a team that could put 5 or 6 goals on you, and that's what's scary. Definitely one of the
It
best
is a
out of it.
scary thought.
Yeah, definitely the East is strong. I think the top 6 in our power rankings were all from the East, 3 from the Atlantic, 3 from the Metro. So it's gonna be hard for them uh, to compete against teams like Tampa and the Penguins and whatnot. But I definitely think they got the core to do it.
Yeah, they're definitely, and I do think they're in their prime years. They're probably just behind the Avs in terms of, um, where they sit in terms of franchise, but they're right there. And this
Hmm.
is their golden years. And I think, the next 3 or 4 years is probably their best chance winning cups. And then it will start to fall off. So, yeah, if they're going to win a cup, I think they do it in the next, 4 years. So the next 4 years, they'll really be pushing to win that Stanley Cup. I mean, it could happen as early as this year with the way they're playing.
And I would just like to say,
All
didn't
right.
say it at the start, but the listings in the columns, they're just in random order. We're not saying that Tampa's the best contender and then Avs second. It's just in random order.
This
Alrighty.
is completely randomized.
Yep.
All right. Next team, we're on to the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, the New Jersey Devils is interesting one, isn't it? They've had a flying start where you definitely slot them in as contenders, and then they've fallen off a little bit. I think at the start of the season, I had them on the verge, and I think they're still on the verge. They're definitely teetering on contenders. They're looking at putting on a dynasty, and they're probably going to be contenders next year onwards for the next 5 or so years. But on the verge for now, I believe they'll make the playoffs. Hopefully, go further than round 1 for themselves, get some playoff experience. But they just got a young core, and it's just growing into that young core, making them adults really.
Yeah. I think they're where Colorado were a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. They're real young team, and they just need to build on that and get them some experience, get them in the playoffs. It might not go overly well the first time or the first 2 times, but as they get that experience, they learn how to play playoff hockey. I think they'll really set themselves up to to win a cup. I really do think this team can win a cup, um, as long as everything goes well, as long as management continues to do the right thing, and no player gets too greedy and starts taking
Yeah.
too big of a
Well,
pie.
that's the big question. Jesper Bratt, if he asks for too much money, you move him on because as the league shows and what teams win the cup and stuff, it's the players in regards to how much they're making in salary. So that's the thing. But that'll be a question for next year.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
exactly. All right, on to the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, another interesting team. You'd probably want them a bit higher than where we have them. Oh, I think they've got a decent core, but I think they need to make 1 or 2 changes to fix what they've got there. Um, Whether you move your captain or not, and so I think we've got them under retooling.
Yeah, I definitely think they're a retooling side. They've got a lot of good young talent as well. Like you look at Jordan Kyrou and Rob Thomas, etc. They're still young, 23 and 24. Um, they've got a lot of players around that late 20s, early 30s sort of point. But the difficult thing for me is probably Ryan O'Reilly, Tarasenko, UFAs at the end of this year. They don't exactly look like they're in contending a position to contend this year. It's just not going right for them. Binnington has been very ordinary. What do you do from their perspective?
Yeah,
Um, do you trade out Ryan O'Reilly and Tarasenko, get in some assets, and
I think you
try and
do.
flip them quickly? Because I feel like if you hold on to them, all you're doing is pushing yourself closer to the rebuild phase than the contending phase.
Yeah, my issue for them is that they were a big, strong, heavy team built around when they won the cup and whatnot. All the players were big, they were heavy, they played a heavy game, and then all the younger style players that they've picked up and whatnot have been the faster skill based, and they're kind of in the mix now of skill and tough, and I think that's why it's not working. Sure, some players have regressed a little bit, but I think it's just they're in the middle of two systems of skill based and heavy based, and that's the problem for them. So they just need to
It
retool.
could be a system change.
Yeah, just go one
Yeah,
way, go and retool, go one way or the other, and I think they're back on the verge.
awesome. All right, on to the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, and another team that should be under contenders, I believe, at the start of the season. It's where I would have had them. But how they
Well, it flipped,
performed,
didn't it?
yeah, how they've performed
Yeah.
and everything like that, definitely got them under retooling. They've just got to make a couple more changes. Either you do it coaching or player base is up to you, but I think they've got to make a couple changes to get them on the verge and if not contending.
Yeah, I look. It's been a yo-yo. Not even 12 months for them. Probably 6 months, 3 months, or however long that's been since Johnny Goodrow. When was July? 6 months. Um, they went from contenders getting kicked out in the second round against Edmonton, to rebuilders when they lost Kachuk and Goudreau, to uh, everyone thinking that they were going to be contenders again. But something's just not clicking. And I don't know if it is that change up of players, Hugo trying to learn a new system, Uyghur trying to learn a new system. But something seems to be going wrong there. So yeah, I feel like they need to change something. It could be their system. Um, they do seem like they want to play a very physical style. I feel like they're probably similar to St. Louis in a way. Like they they might not be as big, but they want to play physical. They want to push teams around, but they're also very skillful. So I feel like they get caught into
Hmm.
two styles of play.
Yeah, you got to play to your strengths. You shouldn't come in a system like this is what we play. Like, all right, this is a team we got. We should play to this type of game. Um, all right, next team.
Next team, we've got the Los Angeles Kings.
Yeah, LA Kings definitely had a similar season in the sense of yo-yoing, and they don't really look great on the ice half the time. I I and you definitely have them under retooling. It's just they've got to add a little bit. They've got I think a couple contracts coming off in 1 to 2 years. That definitely helps. Jonathan Quicks comes off this year, and that can help them sort out their goaltending and then free up some space for another player on the D or the forward line. But I definitely have them under retooling. I don't have them on the verge, and I don't think they're close to contending yet. But they're definitely
I think they've
definitely not the rebuilders.
no, I don't think they're quite there yet. They've still got, like, you look at their forwards, like they're all mid to late 20s, so they're not old in a sense that you've got to rebuild. The only real old players they've got is Kopitar, Drew Doughty, and Jonathan Quick. So yeah, I feel like they need to find a goaltender. That's probably one of their first real things that they need to do because Jonathan Quick, he's getting older. He's not as good as he once was. You need to find a replacement for him. They've got, I mean, they had Cal Peterson, but he got sent down. So I don't know there. I think that's probably where they need to start is finding a replacement for Quick. Because looking at their forward line, they've got some decent forwards
No, their
there. They've
forward
got
line's
some young
fine. It's just their goaltending and
forwards coming
defense.
through. Yeah, so I think that's probably where you start. You get a. I mean, they got Brant Clark coming through in the defense, but he's probably a couple of years away. I think he's going to be a good player, but he is probably still a couple of years away. So in the time being, they definitely need to put some love into that defense, that blue line, and get a decent gender, and then they might
Yep.
start pushing into that on the Verge
All
category.
Alrighty, next team.
All right, on to um, the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, I'm not even
Uh,
sure we
I,
need to
I think it's
hold off on this one.
straight up rebuilders. It's it's not been known. The management didn't know what they were doing and traded for Seth Jones, and then they go into a rebuild. You know, figure that one out. It's yeah, you got to they just got to move assets and try and make the rebuild as short as possible, and that's all they can focus on now is making sure it's not a 5 to 10 year one, and it's a 3 to 5 year one. But I don't know if that's quite possible. And
I don't think it is, to be
yeah,
honest.
that like yeah,
I just,
there's some
yeah,
big trades. You're losing your two best players over the last 10 or so years with Kane and Taves. You know that dynasty's looks like it's leaving, and there's nothing really replacing it.
no. Like if you look through their lineup, they've got a bunch of late 20s um, fringe players that couldn't really make it in other teams. You know, you got Tyler Johnson. He was good once with Tampa, obviously. And Athanasiu, he's bounced around the league for a number of years, never really being able to sort of stay in one place long enough. Max Domi, same thing. It just seems like their team is full of top up players, even on the back line as well.
Mm,
Other than obviously Seth Jones, but that's a huge contract.
yeah,
They don't have much in the way of goaltenders either. So yeah, to me, it's a full blown rebuild. They got rid of their two younger players that might have helped them
yeah.
speed through this rebuild in
Didn't make
Kirby Dack
sense,
and
does it? Doesn't not make
Brinket.
sense. If I
No,
was
I was a little confused with
if
that.
I owned Chicago, I would have fired the GM. I'm just saying that's what I would have
Yeah.
done. It's probably what they need to
I
do
mean,
in
they've got a
regards
lot
to
of
the rebuild.
picks.
But yeah,
Yeah, they've got a lot of picks, like, and this is probably the year to have a lot of picks with the draft. But they've got their first round, they've got Tampa's first round this year and next year as well. They've also got Tampa's second, Vancouver's second next year, plus Dallas's third and Ottawa's third next year. So they've got some draft picks, and they're obviously going to get more with obviously trading Patrick Kane and Jonathan Tays. But I still think they're 5+ years from being relevant again. But given the success they had, you've got to go through this. You
yep.
don't get to win 3 cups and then just
No,
take
that's
2 years to be contenders again.
Penguins and Caps are looking down the barrel at.
Exactly.
Alrighty, next team.
All right, on to the next team. We got San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, I want to say similar team, but I don't think it's quite as similar. But definitely on the rebuilding spectrum. It's just, well, what do you do with the Eric Carlson contract? You've got some players that you probably need to move out that are your best players. It's, we'll probably do a video one day on doing the trades that they could do to fast track that rebuild. But they're probably looking at a definitely probably 5 year rebuild to finally
I
start
think
being
so.
on the verge. I think you could fast track it to 3 year if you moved assets perfectly and somehow picked up assets perfectly through the draft, but we all know it doesn't really work that way. So yeah, they're looking at a 5 year rebuild, probably moving some of their better players.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they've got some buried cap, or sorry, some dead cap in Brent Burns, Martin Jones, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's bulkers, but they've got almost 6 mil for the next 2 years in those, and I think 4.3 for 3 years. So they've got a lot of cap issues, especially with Carlson, Vlasic, which is older. So they've got a lot of players that they're not really going to be able to move because no one's going to absorb the Vlasic contract, and that's 4 years at 7 mil.
With
Eric Carlson's going to be difficult to move, but I think they can if they retain 50% of that salary. But that's 50% for 5 years.
and
That's
just on the Vlasic thing,
5.75
he has
mil.
a NMC that from next year onwards he gets to only be traded to 3 teams. He submits a 3-team trade list, and that's it. So good luck.
I
Good
just
luck
don't
with
think
that.
you can.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Exactly. I just don't think you can. No one's going to take a 35-year-old who isn't really producing much at $7 million for 3 years. It's just not going to happen. Logan Couture, Thomas Hurdle, you could move those players. I think you would have to retain Logan Couture's salary, some of it. Thomas Hurdle, I think you'd be less likely to do that. He's reasonable age of 29. 8 million's not terrible for what like I probably would have liked it a bit less, but yeah, you definitely they're gonna have a tough time, that's for sure. So I think they're probably 5 years minimum of being even considered relevant.
Yep.
All right, moving on. We've got the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, well, they're definitely contending for the cup this year, but the question is what happens on the year onwards, and I think that's why we agree they're probably in the last hurrah. It honestly, I think, depends on if they do sign Pasternak, how much he gets, to then what else they could do with that team. But it does look like a last hurrah for them for that core to win a cup. But they're definitely the biggest contenders at the moment to win. But we know, start of the season doesn't really matter how you play in the playoffs. But yeah, it looks like they'll probably be in a rebuild soon.
Yeah,
Been good for too many years.
yeah, exactly. And it's been a long time since they won their cup. But they were obviously in it a few years back as well. They've always been around that mark. Um, you know, their blue line is reasonably aged. Their goalies are reasonably aged as well, but I think that their forwards are where it's starting to fall away for me. I think they could contend for the next couple years. It just depends on contracts at the end of the day, because you've got, yeah, like you said, you got Pasternak's contract. What's he going to sign? You've got Foligno's contract. Pavel Zarka's a UFA now because they only signed him for a year. Bergeron's obviously, what's he going to do? And he is aging. He's still playing like an absolute beast, but he's 37 years old. How much longer can he go, and how much longer can he go at his best? Same with Krejci. So, yeah, it really comes down to how much longer can these aging forwards of theirs keep it together and and keep them contending. I think they've potentially got another year after this year in them if they can sign a few of those guys, re-sign a few, but it's definitely getting towards the end. That's for sure.
Yep.
Right, we're on to the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, one of the better teams out in the West, and look, they've got an amazing young group with like Robertson and whatnot. The way they play, I think they're going to be good for a while. They still have some players on expensive contracts to how they play, but those youngsters are really outweighing that, I believe, and I definitely have them as contenders this year. Not just because they're in the West, but I think they've been playing good and they've been solid, easily top 10 team all season, and it looks like they'll be good for a few more years to come.
Yeah, it's interesting because I probably had them, maybe they're on their last hurrah, with a few players because it looked like Jamie Benn sort of, 9.5 mil contract. He's not playing to that. Tyler Seguin, how long can he keep? Almost a 10 mil cap hit, hitting his 30s. Pavelski is going to move on eventually. But the Jason Robertson coming in and playing the way he is, Rupe Hintz doing what he's doing, they've just rejuvenated this team. And then obviously you throw in Miro Heiskanen in that back end. They potentially need, maybe another player in that on that blue line just to solidify it a bit. But yeah, they're definitely in that contenders spot for me. And as long as their goalie situation can stay the way it's working currently, and Wedgwood can be that reasonable backup, and they don't get any injuries on that front, I think they'll definitely be there when playoffs come around.
Yeah, I agree.
On to the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, Winnipeg Jets, a team that I think everybody keeps sleeping on every year. And I understand, Hellebuck covers a lot, but I definitely have them as contenders. I understand, some of their core is aging, but I think they can build around that while continuing. So I don't think it's a last hurrah for them. I definitely have them as contenders, and they've probably been one of the best teams out in the West all season. And obviously, it's because you probably got one of the best goalies on probably one of the best contracts, really, in Hellebuck.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think they've got a real, like, you look at their forward structure at the moment, and they're mid to late 20s. They're sort of geared up. They're in that prime. Um, Kyle Connor, 26 years old. Chifolle's 29. Dubois 24. Um, and then they've got a couple of young lads in Cole Perfetti coming through. He's only 20, but yeah, it's a nice mix. They don't have too. They've got, I think, Sam Gagner, who's over 30, and I think they've got Blake Wheeler, who's on injured reserve, who's over 30. But the rest of them are quite young. You've got Nikolai Ehlers, who's only 26. Nate Schmid, who's on their defense, he's 31, but still, it's still kind of in your prime. That's right where you want them. And the way Hellebuck plays and carries them, I think they do need to fix some holes, and whether it's system or whether it's getting a more defensively minded player into that blue line for them. They need to fix some things there, but Hellebuck can carry, and we've seen through the years with teams that win the Stanley Cup, they generally have a goalie that stands on his head, and Hellebuck can be that goaltender, in
Yep,
my opinion.
yep.
All right, we've got the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah, this is interesting, and I think it's completely dependent on what the general manager does in the off season or even during the before the deadline. But I have them on the verge. They're kind of been like the Devils every year, just slightly getting better out of their rebuild. But they got some questions around what happens with Larkin and some of their other UFAs. They've got a lot of UFAs to sign this year, and so it could be a retool slash rebuild even again if it doesn't go well with signing some of those players and they go to the market.
Yeah, that's my worry with them, is just the amount of UFAs they've got to re-sign. Um, you got Tyler Bertuzzi. He's off. Dylan Larkin, he's a UFA. Sunquist is UFA. Ernie is UFA, and Suter's UFA. So and that's just their forwards. Once you go to their defense, they're probably not their best players, but you still have to replace these players. So I still think they're good, and I've got faith in Userman. If anyone's going to do it, it's him. He'll be able to sort of work things out with Larkin and a few others, probably move a few pieces to bring in some quality players. So that's why I think we've got them on the verge. We've got a lot of faith in what he can do with this franchise. But it is one of those that you look at and go, one wrong move and you're back in the rebuild uh, sort of phase for them. So All right. On to the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, Ottawa Senators. Yeah, what do you say in regards to them? They've had a definitely up and down season so far. It's I think they're on the up and up, and I think they can only get better, honestly. And they're past their rebuild. Honestly, a lot depends on whoever buys out the team, then what they do with management and whatnot, or if they keep their hands off. But you're probably looking at them being on the verge, honestly. Um, that's where I would have them. I think that's where we have them, and I think they're on for good things. They probably just need to bring in a defender. I know there's trade rumors with them and defenders, and hey, maybe if Quinn Hughes was on the market, maybe they're going to poach him.
Yeah, I think I mean it makes a lot of sense. They need a defender, and if he's available, why wouldn't you go after him? I know a lot of people are thinking the Devils are going to chase him. I'm not sure that they can make that happen, but Ottawa's definitely a team that could. Um, their biggest issue is probably they've got some dead cap problems for the next 2 years, about 5 mil tied up there. But they've got such a young core, young talented core. They've signed a lot of them up long term. They do have to sign DeBrincat this year, which is one of the questions. How much is he going to want? How much do you sign him for? I think Shane Pinto might. Yeah, I think he is up for an RFA, but I dare say that'll probably be a bridge deal of sorts. Um, yeah, but I think for these guys, they're 100% heading in the right direction. They're playing great hockey, and yeah, I think in a couple of years they'll move into that contenders spot. All right, on to the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. They brought in a new coach who has his own new system. But I looking at it from what they have in regards to the roster, what the coach wants. I think they're rebuilders. I don't think they're rebuilders, but I think they need to be rebuilders. They need to change a lot. With the whole Kevin Hayes situation. The best goal scorer basically getting healthy scratch, and there was talks from the general manager and him about basically him being a buyout coming up because if nobody could take that contract. So definitely a rebuilder for me.
Yeah, they've got to be a rebuilder. I was surprised that they didn't make that call this year, especially with how strong the Metro is. For them to even think that they could compete in that division, just blows my mind. I feel like they're wasting a year here. I think they need to be looking at getting as many assets as they can. I know they brought in a couple of players to sort of show that they didn't want to go down the rebuild phase, and they wanted to sort of stay relevant with Ristolainen and D'Angelo and the rest of that. But I'm sorry, I can't see it for these guys. I think they need to go into a full rebuild, and they need to tear it down and rebuild it. Torts could do that, whether or not he wants to hang around for that, I don't know, but they
No,
definitely need to
I
do
think
it
he
'cause
thought he could turn that team around, but having a look at what's there, I don't think he can. And it's just because they do need to do that full rebuild. You're competing against teams in the Metro. The six of them are basically almost contenders, essentially. So you've where does that put you? You either have to retool or rebuild, essentially. And I know you got to wait for Penguins and the Caps to finally go into their rebuild till you flick at the switch. I think that's what you wait for.
exactly. And that's what they don't want to do either. Take too long. That by the time they decide that oh shit, we've been in no man's land for 2 or 3 years now, we need a rebuild. The Pens and the Caps are already successfully rebuilding and starting to head on the way back up. And it's like, oh crap, we missed the boat.
Yep.
Um, but yeah. All
All right.
right, on to the New York Islanders.
Yeah, another very interesting team with the cap situation and everything. I think they're getting Lou Lamoriello. They're basically going to be contending, but it's going to destroy your future, and so that's why you put them in the last hurrah. They've got some very old people on that team now, kind of how New Jersey Devils looked around 2012. So, yeah, it's kind of a last hurrah. The thing that worries me is when they do have to do the rebuild, how long is that going to be? Because Lou Lamoriello basically destroyed the New Jersey Devils franchise for at least 5 years.
because he refused to do
Because
it.
he refused to rebuild. So that's what worries me for the Islanders. But hopefully they can keep competing for 1 to 3 years before that full death rebuild happens.
Yeah, I just think they've got an aging list, especially in their forwards. Their defense is a little bit better. They've got some nicely aged players there, but for those forwards, they've got a lot of you know early-ish 30s, but mid 30s as well. So I don't know how much longer. They've probably got 1, 2, maybe 3 years left in them. But I also I'm not sure their list is strong enough to contend either. So I definitely have them on the lower end of the last hurrah teams. Um, yeah, it's going to be interesting for them and what Lou is going to do. Will he just do what he did with the Devils, try and bring in aging players to try and get them there, and it just never worked like it happened with the Devils. Um,
Yeah, if you win the cup, it
all
looks
right,
amazing. If you don't, then you destroy the franchise. That's how it is.
exactly. All right, on to the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah,
Um,
this is an interesting one. I think a lot of people will
eh,
uppity about and cry about where they are, but I think it's
yeah,
realistic on where they are, and we've got them under retooling. It's just they have to make changes, coaching and player base, like not and player base, but all player base. Uh, Definitely player base. So and or they've got Darnell Nurse, which is probably one of the worst defenders with one of the worst contracts. McDavid's on a huge contract. They've got contract issues, and they're basically like 4 players playing in McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent, and Hyman, and that's not a recipe for success. So yeah, they got to retool. It's simple as that. They're definitely not rebuilders, but to become a contender, they need to make some changes.
yeah, 100%. They've got some good players in their goaltending.
Whoops.
They've got Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner, but I just like that defense is shocking for me. And their forwards, like you said, they've got one line, one and a half maybe. And I just don't think you get it done. I know they've got two of the best players in the league, but you need more than that. And when you have so much cap sort of stuck with those players that you do, it does make it a lot harder. So they do need a retooling. They could make it work to them getting into that contenders category, but I think they've got their work cut out for them, honestly.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Alrighty.
All right, on to the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, this is probably a team similar to Ottawa, really. So probably in the same category on the verge. On the up, Tage Thompson's proving all the haters and disbelievers wrong, and it looks like since the Eichel debacle, it looks like they're just constantly on the up and up. So I think they've got a little bit to go, definitely to get in that contender stage, but they're setting themselves up to compete over the next few years. And there's a lot to like about just the way they play the game as well. So, add a piece here and there on the off seasons in regards to draft picks and whatnot, and they're good to go.
Yeah, 100%. I like what we're seeing from them. They've got two really fantastic young up and coming defenders as well in Horn Power and Ramin Starlin. They're going to control the blue line for years to come. Um, and then they've got some nice young players in their forward line in terms of as you mentioned, Tage Thompson,
Yeah,
Krebs, Cousins, Jack Quinn. Yeah, like they're just
they've got a young core
getting rid of
replacing those old guys, and they've
exactly and getting rid of Eichel was the best thing they've ever done.
yeah,
Like
they moved
they
on from
needed
that.
to do
They had
it.
to do it,
Exactly.
and they've got Phillies and Vegas' second round this year. The Philly one will be looking like a high pick, so that's definitely been a good pickup. And they've also got a lot of cap space, but I know the owner is very stingy when it comes to that. So depending if they
That'll be the
use that
question.
cap space or not.
Yeah. And the crazy thing, I heard a rumor. I don't know. It came from Elliot Friedman, I think. He said Tage Thompson a few years back was almost traded for a
Yeah,
fifth round pick.
yeah, and the team
Wow.
declined. That was even
Wow.
when he was at Buffalo, but that's when he wasn't playing great.
Yeah. And I mean, if he did get traded, there's no guarantee that he does what he's done with Buffalo, but it does, looking back on it now, it looks like, wow, whoever that team was, you missed out.
Yeah,
Um,
it's one of those things though. Like he's developed so well because he's been on a team like Buffalo, so he gets to play those first line minutes. You go to a contending team or whatnot, you're on the third line, you're playing alongside worse wingers that aren't feeding you the puck, and yeah, so you don't develop as better. So I think that's part of his development.
Yeah, that's why it's hard to know what would have happened. But yeah, I just thought it was funny. All right, on to the
Yeah, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Definitely an interesting one. People will probably up and cry where we have them as well. Uh, hint, hint, we don't have them under contenders. Got them under on the Verge, and it's just because, well, you have to prove it in playoffs. They haven't done it over the last few years. First round exits. That core, it's great and everything. Defense and goaltending has always been the question. It's looking better this season, but you still have two injury-prone goaltenders, and so they might be great right now. But if they get injured near the end of the season in playoffs, then who knows? So they're still on the verge for me. I don't have them as contenders. They got to prove more.
honestly, I feel like if they get through the first round, it could be happening. Like that's
It's
I
almost
think
like if they get
they're
through Tampa or not. It's kind of the
yeah.
question.
Well, exactly right. Like you're looking at Toronto. If you look at on the Verge, the teams we've got in there, it's probably Minnesota, Toronto are the closest teams to being in that contender list, and then it's probably New Jersey um, from there. But I think if Toronto had made it through a first round, we'd probably have them in that contenders category. We need to see them bring it in playoffs
Yeah.
finally.
It's just
Uh,
hard to have them contenders when the East is so strong. Yeah, Penguins looks like they could win it. Boston definitely looks like they could win it. Tampa's Tampa, and Capitals is honestly doing what they did when they won the cup. So you got to go through those teams to get even to the cup. And I'm
exactly.
I'm not
All
sure that they
right.
have it in them already.
Yeah. All right. We're on to the New York Rangers.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. With how they've played this season to where they should be and how they can play and how they've picked it up again recently. But we have them under contenders. Definitely a strong
Mhm.
team. I think they've got everything there. We talked about you need a goaltender. They've got the goaltender. They've got the forwards. They got the
Got the
defense.
defense.
It they've got everything to be a contender. So it's just putting it all together. That's basically it. And I think they're starting to do that and looking really strong. And that's once again another Metro and Eastern team that other teams would have to go through.
And do you know what the crazy thing is? They've got Dallas's first round pick this year.
Mm,
So they've got their own first round pick and they've got Dallas's. So it really does set them up for, especially if they pick up Patrick Kane. They've got the assets to do it. And Patrick Kane could really just complete that forward line. Um, and it's scary. You know, as a Devils fan, I don't really want to see them win the cup, but they're definitely contenders. And they showed last year by making it to the Eastern Conference Final that they can show up in playoffs,
mm.
and they are a team that can play playoff hockey. So yeah, I don't think you could have them anywhere else but contenders for me.
Yep.
Um,
Alrighty.
all right, on to the Montreal Canadiens. We're down to the last two teams here.
Yeah, last two teams, Montreal Canadiens, they've got a first line. There's no debate about that. Some really good players that you can build around, but I still have them in the rebuilders stage. I think they're still going to add a few more assets to get them into that contending or on the verge status. But they got the first line to build around, and that's a good start. My issue is how long they're going to be in that rebuilder status. That's my issue.
Yeah, look, I think they're probably a step or two behind the likes of Buffalo, Ottawa, New Jersey, Detroit, sort of thing. Um, but I definitely think they're headed in the right direction. Out of all of these teams in the rebuild list, I think they're best geared um, to go on to potentially go on a dynasty. Um, don't get too carried away. Still a lot of work to do with the franchise, but um, so far so good for them. I think give them another year or two to develop those younger players, bring in a couple of other assets, and then yeah, away they go.
Yeah,
Um,
I think they've got things to add. On the D line, got a lot of youngsters there, and their goaltending's up in question. It's still interesting to see Carey Price on the long-term injured reserve. But they got some bad contracts, I believe, and like Brendan Gallagher, 6.5. Um, so they got a little bit to work around with, but I reckon by next year they'll be in retooling, and then they can go from there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's looking up for them. They've got a bit of work to do, but overall, it's pretty good. All right, on to our last team. Um, yeah, the Arizona Coyotes. What a team to have last. It's probably ironic. I mean, I know they're not last in the NHL standings, but we definitely thought they would be. um,
That's the thing. It's pretty
yeah,
straightforward
it's
where we have them.
yeah. That's don't need to hide this for too long. So
Yeah,
um, yeah. What else can you say about them? They're in a rebuild. It's pretty obvious,
yeah.
but they're showing a lot of heart.
Now they've got a lot of salary cap space they can work with eating bad contracts. They got a lot of picks in the future. They've only got 1/3 this year, but two extra seconds and three extra thirds the year after, then two extra thirds the year after that. Second, sorry, after that. So they got a lot of picks. It's by the time they start getting into retooling on the Verge, they will have Clayton Keller probably around 27 years of age, probably in his prime. He's playing amazing at the moment. Nick Schmaltz will be 29, 30. So they're not
Lawson
then
Krause, same similar age.
yeah, then
Yeah.
they're not really an old team. It's not gonna take too much, I don't think, to make him good. And they got a lot of cap space they can use up and eat some bad contracts to then get more picks for this year or next year. And they still got Chikrin who could be traded. So yeah, a lot of ups. Probably 3 years out though.
Yeah, I think they've got. Yeah, it's going to be a while. It's going to be a 3 to 5 year build for them, but they've definitely got some players, man. Like got Connor Geeky, Dylan Gunther, um, coming through their ranks. And they've got a couple of defenders that we have to wait to see how they turn out. But Maverick Lamoureux, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Looks like he could have some potential. So they're definitely building something there, especially with some of those young core players at the moment that you mentioned. Um, some of them are coming out of contract when they'll probably be relevant. So the question will be, can they re-sign them, etc. But you know, Keller, Schmaltz, Kraus, Barrett, Hayton, in 3 to 5 years when they become relevant, they're in their prime. So they play their cards right and they can really add those assets to that team, get their new stadium together. I think they could finally build to something which
Yeah. Well,
yeah is
well,
what they need to
that's
do.
the other thing you touched on. You don't want to underestimate is they don't have that stadium yet, which means they're only getting like 4,600 people attending. So their ticket sales, like the tickets are a bit more expensive because of that, and they're selling out. but they're not making that
Mhm.
much money. So that's why they have to have so much more money in the free cap space to be able to balance that that money sheet. But once they get that stadium, hopefully they do, and go from there. I think it's all up on the up, and they can start using that free cap space to eat bad contracts.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I'm hopeful for them because I really do. I know Bettman's considering signing a no movement clause for them for 30 years or whatever it is. But if they don't make something out of them in this rebuild, you do have to really start questioning whether or not hockey in Arizona is going to work, whether or not you need to move that team. But I'm hopeful for them. I think if they get the right management team and all that together, coaching structure, and then they turn those assets into quality players, they'll be on the up and up.
Yep, I agree. All right, you
All
want to sign
right,
us out?
guys. Yeah, there's our 32 teams and where we think their franchise status sits. Let us know what you think. Did we get it right? Did we get it horribly wrong? Uh, were we 50-50? Let us know in the comments below. If you like the video, give us a big thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, take it easy.
Yeah, catch you guys.